Last week we talked a little bit about Jezebel, King Ahab's queen. Now in modern times we use the word Jezebel to describe an immoral person who brings about destruction. In the Bible we learn that Jezebel was a princess from Tyre who was married to Ahab, the son of Israel's king Omri. This created a political alliance between the two countries. When she became queen, she institutionalized the worship of Baal and Asherah throughout Israel, slaughtered God's prophets, and brought in 800 prophets of Baal. It's because of Jezebel that Israel turned from God. That's why Elijah came out of the wilderness to confront King Ahab and announce God's punishment, a drought across the land. As we discussed, God then sent Elijah to the Kerith Brook to ride out the first part of the drought. After a year, God commands Elijah to leave the asylum of the ravine and travel to Zarephath, a hostile pagan land controlled by Jezebel's father. He's entering enemy territory. This is where he meets the poverty-stricken widow, whom God destined to feed Elijah with her very last crust. The name Zarephath comes from the Hebrew word serap, meaning smelt or refine. In ancient times, a goldsmith would refine his crude gold ore by subjecting it to intense heat. When the ore liquefies, impurities in the metal rise to the surface, which the goldsmith skims off. Once the metal worker has been able to see his reflection clearly in the surface of the liquid metal, he knew it was refined to pure gold. Zarephath is a smelting place, a place of testing. It is here that Elijah was refined. His spiritual sight was sharpened to see beyond his human sight with his physical eyes. Elijah saw a destitute Gentile woman from a pagan nation, the very people who stood against God. He saw her starved, bankrupt, and hopeless life. But God saw in her an emptied vessel primed for a miracle. Her worldly resources were almost gone, leaving a humble, clean vessel ready to channel his boundless provision. God opened Elijah's spiritual eyes. The widow had only enough flour and oil for one last meal. But in 1 Kings 17, verses 13 and 14, Elijah tells her, "Do not be afraid. Go home and make a small cake of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the oil will not run dry until the day the Lord gives rain on the land." She obeyed God's words to her, and her faithfulness produced a miracle. Verses 15 and 16 tell us, "There was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family, for the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah." Our faith in God grows as it is challenged. Inside enemy territory, amidst the desolation of drought, God provided for Elijah through the most unlikely of people. And before that, God delivered Elijah food in the wilderness by unclean, obnoxious scavenger birds. Do you think Elijah was emboldened to take larger steps of faith after having his trust in God affirmed again and again? I can remember in my own life when I began to tithe. Each time I tithed, I saw God come through in some amazing ways. You know what it challenged me to do? To give even more. And you know what? Even as I was emboldened to give more, God has never forgotten us, for we have never gone in want. James 1, verse 2 and 3 give us this challenge. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. To endure tests of faith, we must follow Jesus' example. Hebrews 12:2 says, "We look away from the natural realm and we focus our attention and expectation onto Jesus, who birthed faith within us and who leads us forward into faith's perfection." His example is this: because his heart was focused on the joy of knowing that you would be his, he endured the agony of the cross and conquered its humiliation, and now sits exalted at the right hand of the throne of God. We should let the challenges of this life refine our faith until we see the pure face of God reflected over the image of this world. We can persevere in obedience because we know God uses our trials for His good to deepen our relationship with Him and show His glory to a watching world. Spend some time now sharing with your group. How can you look beyond suffering and choose joy? Have you been through experiences that refined your faith and taught you to trust God in impossible situations? May God bless you and reveal Himself through your time together.